All right, here's a situation that if you haven't already been into, you'll most definitely find yourself in. So let's say you're writing unit tests for your services and use cases, and you need to mock a specific package, like for example, the nano ID. In this case, inside of the create collection method, I'm using nano ID to generate a fingerprint, which is going to be set to the collection entity as the primary key. So I want to mock this to always return the same value so that I can test what happens when a collision happens, aka when the NanoID library generates two of the same fingerprints. So in this method, I have used v.mock on the NanoID package and returned a mocked NanoID function that always returns test-fingerprint. And if I run this test case, it's going to be all good. But if I run the next one, we get an issue. The issue is assertion error, expected test fingerprint not to be test fingerprint. All right, so why is that happening? Here it is. So in this test case, we're not actually mocking the NanoID library, but we're still finding the fingerprint to be test fingerprint, even though we're not mocking this. Well, the issue is that Vitest will automatically hoist any v.mock instances in your test file. So this will be the same as this. It will put all of the v.mock invocations at the top of the file. So all of your tests are going to use the mocked version of NanoID. And if I run the tests again, you'll see the same result. There we go. Expected test fingerprint not to be test fingerprint. So how do we do this? Well, there is a v.unmock. Maybe we can try that. For example, here's the test case where we want NanoID to be mocked. So we can, at the end of it, we can do v.unmock NanoID, and this is going to remove the mocked NanoID version. But let's see what happens. If I hit refresh, again, now we actually see the other way around. We expected the fingerprint of the first collection to be test fingerprint, but it actually is an actual generated fingerprint. Okay, why is this happening now? Right, we can see that the second test case succeeded, but not the first one. Well, because Vitest also does the same for the unmock. It hoists it all the way up to the top of the file. So it's going to look like this. Our test file, all of our test cases that are here, are going to have their NanoID mocked and then immediately unmocked, which is going to revert whatever this mock factory callback does. It's just going to revert it. So in our first test case, when we expect the fingerprints to be that mocked test fingerprint, it's actually not. So how do you go about this? Well, the solution is to isolate all of the test cases that rely on the mocked version of your npm package into their own file. Okay, so I'm going to delete these here, and I'm going to delete the first one. And I'm actually going to move it into a different file, which I'll call fingerprint collision tests. I'm mocking the NanoID function to return the test fingerprint. So now, if I reload all of the tests, everything will be fine. The results in the old test file are not going to be using the test fingerprint value, but an actual fingerprints. But these ones that we isolated into their own file will. So whenever you want to mock an npm package, but only for specific test cases, you have to isolate them into their own separate file. There's no workaround.
Many unbearable hours later.
Actually, that was a lie. There is a workaround, and the old Lazar that you just saw did not know that. But the new Lazar, me, actually figured it out. So check this out. Here's another way where you can achieve the same thing without actually creating a new test file and isolating all of the test cases that use the mocked variant of the npm package. So what you want to do first is import the function that you want to mock, for example, NanoID at the top right there, and just mock the whole package. So we are mocking NanoID, where the NanoID function will be just v.fn, which is a plain function that returns undefined. It is basically nothing. So we are basically saying nothing or the nanoID function is basically nothing. That means we can put other stuff on top of it or change the implementation. This is important to have, right? This is going to allow us to mock the function. Then inside of the before each, we're going to use the import actual method of the VI to import the actual nanoID, not the mocked version, but the actual nanoID. And this is the TypeScript gymnastics that you need to do in order to have the correct type. So this is the import statement. And then you just say v.mocked nanoID, which comes from the actual import at the top. So v.mocked nanoID function, mock implementation, and we'll just say the actual nanoID dot nanoID, right? So what this is going to do is before each of the tests is going to revert back the nanoID to the original implementation. So all of the tests will start with the actual nanoID implementation, right? We had to do this in order to make nanoID mockable, if you will, but then we're going to do this to actually set the implementation to the original one. So with this line, all of our tests are going to start with the original npm packages functionality, for example. But then we'll jump to the test case, this one, where we actually want to mock the implementation, and we'll just say v.mocked nanoID mock return value, not mock implementation like we previously did, but we don't care about the implementation in this case, we just care about the return value. So mock return value test fingerprint. In this case, we want nanoID to always return test fingerprint. And this goes only for this test case, right? And then after the test is done, after each of the tests, we want to do v.restore all mocks, which is going to bring the mocking to this state right here, where the nanoID is a plain function without any implementation, without any return value. And then before the next test goes, it'll just get reverted to the original one. So you see how this works, right? Before the test, we set it to the original one. Inside of the test, we might or might not mock it. For example, in this case, we don't mock it. It uses the original nanoID implementation. In this case, we do mock it. It's always going to return a test fingerprint. And after all of the tests, or after each of the tests, which is going to restore all mocks, which is going to bring nanoID at this state, which is v.fn, right? That's it. So that is how we can still keep everything into the same file, but use mocking only for a specific or certain test cases. And if I reload or rerun all of these tests, we can see that everything works just fine, just like how we want to. There is a drawback. Okay, so this part right here, where we're importing the actual nanoID and mocking it to the original implementation and then restoring all mocks, this needs to happen for all of the describes, for all of the test suites inside of this file. So if we have another describe right here into the same file, we actually want to do the same right here. And there we go. I'm actually missing the v restore all mocks right here. See, that's how easy it is to make the mistake. You could technically isolate these two in a function if you wanted to. This is like a couple of lines of code. It's not a big deal. But yeah, the only drawback is that if you have multiple describes or multiple test suites into the same file, that's actually going to be a bit problematic, because you need to remember to do the, to remock the original implementation and also restore all mocks before each and after each of the same, of all of the described test suites. So these are the two ways where you can mock an npm package, but for specific test cases, right? This can be the UUID package, it can be nanoID, it can be any npm package that you want. Usually packages that generate something, that generate a string, but you want them to be predictable. So yeah, these are the two ways. There are drawbacks to both of them. The first one, you need to create a separate file. The second one, you need to remember to apply the remocking for every test suite in your file. Do what you like. See what you like the best. There's no pros and cons to each of these. Both solutions work just fine. And yeah, happy testing. Like and subscribe if you like this video. And I'm gonna see you in the next one. Take care.